So I am a junkie for the patience, or for the personality tests. You ever take any of these things, like Myers-Briggs and DISC and Strength Finders, and all of these are very common. And if I've taken probably half a dozen of them. Well, a couple of years ago, I was asked to take another one, and I'm like, sure, no problem. So I signed up, and one of the 4 areas that it said it was going to give me an evaluation on is how patient a person I am. So I was like, okay, whatever. So you can be high patience, you can be low patience, and my results came back, and I'm very low patience. And I was honestly a little offended. I'm like, are you kidding me? This test is telling me that I'm not a patient person. And I was telling my wife about it, and she started laughing at me, and she said, Brian, is this a surprise to you that you're not a patient man? And I'm like, well, a little bit. It's a little bit of a surprise. I mean, who wants to think of themselves as impatient, right? So, honest confession as I start today, my name is Brian, and I am impatient, okay? I admit it. I couldn't a couple of years ago, but I admit it now. Matter of fact, wait is a 4-letter word to me. Don't enjoy it at all. I hate it when you're going through life and God puts up one of these signs for you, right? It's like, wait here now, and you have to stop, and you can't move forward, and you want to move forward. It's like, and again, admittedly, when I was thinking about this message, I'm like, there are a lot of waiting times in our life where it's not that big a deal. Like, I had to wait the other day at Walmart in the checkout line, whoop-de-doo. Sometimes I hit the wrong time in one of our 3 stoplights in Dodgeville, and I have to wait, right, for forever, right? Most of the waiting that we do in our life is not that big a deal. Just a minor annoyance. But then there are times in our lives, in seasons in our life, when God puts up the wait here, stop sign, and it's really painful. I mean, you probably know people in your life who have the wait here sign when it comes to finding someone that they can love, or is it just going to love them back? And they got that wait here sign, and it's really hard. Or they're waiting to start a family. Or they're waiting for one of their kids to step back onto a good path because the path they're on is so destructive for them. And they're waiting. How many people in America right now aren't waiting for their spouse to change in some big area of their life that's affecting everybody? How many people in our world right now aren't waiting for their finances to change and their financial situation to change because it's so tight right now? And there's just a whole bunch of people who are just waiting for things to get better. Here's the problem with someone like me. When you are low patience and God makes you wait, you want to guess what happens inside me spiritually? Can you imagine? Some of you don't have to imagine because you know it happens to you too. In my spiritual journey, I can tell you honestly that those waiting times are some of the hardest for me spiritually to handle. When I'm waiting and I can't see what's ahead and I'm just waiting, it does bad things to me spiritually inside. Because of the stories that we're all tempted to tell in those times, right? We tell the same stories. The story is, oh, you think God cares about you? Look at what he's making you go through right now. You think this is God's sign of his love for you? You think his promises are true for someone like you? They're not true for you. And the waiting can really mess with us spiritually. And by the way, you're in a good place if you're there, because even in the Bible, that's exactly how people felt when God made them wait. The psalmist wrote this. He said, will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? And his promises, are they at an end for all time? You ever been there? You ever felt that way? It's like I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. It's like, okay, clearly you just don't care about me. Clearly that's what the message is, right? You ever been there? Tough to be in a spot like that where you're waiting and you don't know what it means. So we're starting a little series today called Under Construction, and aren't we all? Aren't we all under construction? So I'm no different than any of you. God has still got a lot of things to do, and I want to talk about what to do when God does nothing. Because that's what it feels like sometimes when we're waiting, like God is doing nothing. I want to ask you to open up your program. Inside, you'll find these notes. Would you grab your notes, grab a pen, something to write with as we get into this today? And let's jump right into this. The first thing is you have to realize that waiting is part of God's plan for your life. Ugh. Isn't that like one of the worst things I have ever stood here and said in front of all of you? It's like, waiting is God's plan for your life. Ugh. There is no part of me that likes that. But I was also thinking about, when you think about waiting and the world that we live in, it dawned on me that we used to be better at waiting as a society and a nation. So again, I can't believe words like this come out of my mouth, but when I was a kid, when I was a child, right? Remember saying those things? When I was a child, one of my favorite, matter of fact, the hands down best day of the year next to Christmas was always Saturday mornings. That was the best day of the whole week, Saturday mornings. Because when I was a kid, we had 4 channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS, and that was it. And you watch those 4 channels, and the only times to watch cartoons as a child were Saturday morning, period. There was nothing else. Other than the holidays, if they ran some holiday cartoons, or maybe an after-school PBS special that was a cartoon once in a while, you didn't get cartoons at all except for this narrow little window of time every week. And if you were gone on a Saturday morning, you didn't get to see them. We didn't have VCRs, we didn't have VHS, I knew one person in the entire school that had cable. That's it. I didn't know anyone else. We didn't have it. So if you waited all week for Saturday morning to come, best time of the week as a kid, you get up, you watch your cartoons, and then it was over. It was done. And you waited. And if you missed, like I said, you waited 2 weeks. And we used to do a lot more waiting. And now what do we have? I mean, if I want to, I can go and flip on the Disney Channel and watch cartoons for the rest of my life, right? Never. I mean, I can watch it over and over again. It's just endless. We wait for nothing. And if I'm not going to be here, I can DVR it, right? And DVR and record it and then watch it when I want to watch it. Right? We wait for nothing. And what I think is that the world has changed so much is that, now we have to have our Amazon packages shipped to us next day. It's like, what do you mean I got to wait till tomorrow to get that thing that I absolutely need? Tomorrow, I want it now. And so we bring this impatience into our spirituality, and it's like, hey, I want everything now, God. I've been waiting at least a week. Come on, what's going on here? Something is wrong with you. And I think that tendency is affecting our spirituality. And again, when you look at the Bible, you do not see that. When you look at the Bible, you see stories like this one. In the book of Genesis, there's a story of a young boy named Joseph who has this dream, and the dream is a promise from God. And the dream, his father and brothers all bow down to him. And God is saying to him, in the future, someday, all of your entire family is going to bow down to you. Well, he tells everybody in the family his dream, and his brothers already hate him because they're jealous of his relationship with his dad. So now they really hate him, and so they decide to sell him off into slavery. And so off he goes into Egypt, sold. I mean, boy, talk about dysfunctional family. They sell their brother for some money and then go back and lie to the dad and say that he was killed by wild animals. And off he goes into Egypt. And he lives as a slave in Egypt. And then all of a sudden, he's in this fancy house with this wealthy Egyptian. And then the mistress of the house accuses him of hidden honor, and it's not true at all. He's actually just rejected her advances. And so then the owner of the house is outraged. He throws him into prison. And there he waits in prison. And it's like the story of this wait after wait after wait. And then one day, while he's in prison, a couple of Pharaoh's officials are thrown into prison as well. They have these dreams, and they tell Joseph the dreams, and God gives Joseph the ability to interpret the dreams. And to one of them, he says, yeah, your life is over. Sorry about that. But to the other guy, he says, you're going to be restored. And then he says to him this. He says, when all goes well with you, remember me. Look at those words. Remember me. And show me kindness, mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. Isn't that what you want when you're waiting? You just want God to remember you. Hey, remember me. I'm still here. Please remember me. And what happens in the story? If you know the story, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgets him. And again, that's how many people feel, and I've felt that way with God. in those times of waiting, I feel forgotten. And if you know how the story goes, it goes incredibly. Eventually, Pharaoh himself has a dream. He can't interpret the dream. He's so confused. Nobody can interpret it. And then that official goes, oh, I remember when I was in prison, there was a guy, you got a guy in prison who can interpret dreams. And so they bring Joseph up and they introduce him to the Pharaoh. And God gives Joseph the ability to interpret the dream. And the Pharaoh is so overwhelmed that he makes Joseph number 2 in all of Egypt. And his job is to help prevent the catastrophe that's coming with this famine. And the famine gets so bad that it stretches to where Joseph's father and brothers are, and they have to come to Egypt to buy food. And just like the dream predicted, all those decades earlier, Joseph's brothers bow down. And the promise is fulfilled. And he has to wait and wait and wait and wait before any of that happens. This is the pattern in the Bible. And what you see when you read a story like that, and I want you to write this on your notes because it's really critical, is that God always has a purpose in the waiting. God always has a purpose in the waiting. If you are waiting today, it's not arbitrary. God has a purpose in it. He always has a purpose in the waiting. And this is really critical for us spiritually because God has made us huge promises, just like he made to Joseph. He said, God has promised that he's going to provide for us. He's promised to guide us. He's promised to help us. He's promised to fight our battles. He's promised to comfort us. He's promised that he's always for us and that he is always working, even when it seems like he isn't working. And these are just a few of the many, many, many promises God has made to all of us who say that we follow Jesus. So he makes these incredible promises, and here's what happens in our life. We have needs. And what do? We ask God for help. And what happens? Nothing. Silence. Waiting. And that's where our faith gets like, well, what's going on here? You said this, I asked for it, I get nothing. Are you a liar? And the waiting is really hard on a lot of people's spiritual faith. Their faith suffers. My faith suffers. So in my life, I've seen 5 distinct reasons. Matter of fact, flip your notes over in the back. You don't have to do it right now, but on the back, I put down lessons I have learned while waiting. I wonder what you would put down. What spiritual lessons has God taught you in times where you've had to wait? Here's what he's taught me. These are my 5 key things. First, circumstances may not be right yet. Back on the front, circumstances may not be right. And I'm just going to touch on some of these. There's a couple I want to talk a little bit more about. But this is the story of Joseph, right? God makes his promise that even his brothers are going to bow to him, but it takes decades before that promise is fulfilled because the circumstances aren't right yet. So God says, I will provide for you. Okay, but the circumstances aren't right yet. God says, I'm going to guide you, but the circumstances aren't right yet. It's coming, you just don't have it yet. Sometimes he's waiting for me to let go of what I want. Oh my goodness, this is a killer for me. This one gets me in trouble all the time. Sometimes he has me waiting until I get to the end of my will. Because the prayer that Jesus taught is not, Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. My kingdom come. My will be done on earth. It's not done that way in heaven, right? So that's not the prayer. But that's how I live. And I tell God all the time what I want him to do. And then I get mad when he doesn't do it while I'm waiting. And many, many times, he is just waiting till I let go of my will. Many, many times. I love how this one author put it. He said this, if we simply can't wait on God, it's likely because something we want to happen is more important to us than whose plan? God's plan. That has happened to me so many times in life, I can't even count it. And then oftentimes it's in the waiting and waiting and waiting that it's so painful that I finally get to that point of surrender and I say, okay, enough. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Your kingdom come, your will be done. This is what I want, I'm letting it go. You show me what you want, and that's what I want. And I can't even tell you how many times that's when God shows up. He's just waiting for me to stop making it about me. Third, he's trying to develop patience in me. It's such an important quality. So how does he develop patience in me? He makes me wait. My wife is the one who actually taught me, look at this verse, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. I often thought that I was good at this one because I waited. And my wife's the one who pointed out, Brian, there's a difference between waiting and waiting patiently, right? That's a new revelation for me. I thought because I was waiting, I was gold. It's like, no. There's a difference between waiting and waiting patiently. Which one do you do? Are you a patient waiter? Or just a waiter? Because you can wait and complain, and you can wait and put pressure, and you can wait and strive. And it's like, no, wait and be patient. This is the big one in my life. He uses it to reveal my idols. He's done this to me, and I'm grateful, but it's painful. Over and over again. An idol is anything that we want in this world, or anyone that we want, more than we want God. That's an idol. Anything that we want in this world more than we want God. It's always defined by, what is it that if God didn't do this for you or give this to you, would you walk away from God? If God made it so you lost your job and you lost your health and you lost your money and you lost your home, you'd be like, I'm done with God. Is that it? Because then that's your true God. Because the only reason God's here is to give you that. And if he doesn't give you that, then you're done with God. That's your idol. That's your true God. And idolatry is so common, it steals into my heart where all of a sudden I want things from God more than I want him. This one author said, so I'm waiting for God, and God is waiting for me to see if I really am waiting for him or not just wanting things from him. So do you really want God, or do you really want things from God? If God never gave you another thing for the rest of your life, would he be enough? Or do you want stuff from God? This is the tough one, right? This is where I get convicted all the time. I want things from him more than I want him, and that usually gets revealed in the waiting. It's like, you know what, God, I'm sorry. I'm getting really mad at you because you're making me wait because I want this thing from you more than I want you, and I'm sorry. Psalm 73:25 says that we have to get it to the point where I desire you more than anything on earth. Do you? Do you desire God more than anything on earth? And then the final one is he's trying to get me to depend on him more. This is a common one in those waiting times. He's trying to get me to depend on him more. When I was prepping, I read this quote that just blew me away. I do not, by the way, agree with this, but I'm going to say it to you. This is the most precious answer God can give us. Wait. Right? How many of you said, oh my goodness, yes, I so agree with that. I'm going to put that on a wall, a picture in my wall, hang it up in my living room. Oh, the most precious answer God can give me is wait. How many of you think, yes? Right? I told you, I don't agree with it. It's true, but I struggle with it. And here's why they said it's true. Because it makes us cling to him rather than to an outcome. So have you ever waited and waited and waited and waited and waited, and the waiting time actually drove you closer to God? If not, then you have to go back to the one before, because it probably was that you were using God. But many times it's in that waiting time that God himself becomes the thing that we want most. He is what we want, and we are depending on him. So this author said, God knows what I need, I don't. He sees the future, I cannot. His perspective is eternal, mine is not. So he will give me what is best for me when it is best for me. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? That he will give you what's best for you when it's the right time. If you do, then you'll wait. And you'll wait patiently. Because you know this is true. The waiting room is a place of preparation, not punishment. So, what does God have you waiting for today? Understand that waiting plays an important role in our spiritual journeys. And so, since we know that God always has a purpose in it, the second thing is we want to let that waiting time drive us closer to God. We want to let that waiting time drive us closer to God. I got a lot of quotes in my message today. I kept reading these things that were so striking to me, and so a little bit different from my kind of message. But the person who trusts God sees affliction and waiting as growth times. And they grow because of deep confidence in God and what he's doing. Is that what happens to you when God makes you wait? Do you look back on those waiting times and say, thank God he made me wait because of all the positive spiritual things that happened? Right? People who don't trust God view affliction or waiting like attacks or threats to safety and security, and their response is to turn inward to come up with their own resources and to trust in themselves. And by the way, that's usually where faith falls apart. That's usually where they walk out of the doors and they're done with God. So what happens in your soul when God makes you wait? Is it that you grow deeper or you really struggle? Which way is waiting taking you? So how do we wait with faith? The first thing is to remember how God has been faithful in the past. The first thing, remember how God has been faithful in the past. This one comes right from the book of Psalms. As you know, I talk a lot about if you're in pain and struggling, go to the book of Psalms and read. And there's a story, there are many examples of this in the book of Psalms. Here's one. In Psalm 77, there was problems they could not solve on their own, and they were waiting for God to help. And as the time goes on, that's when it gets hard, right? There were big problems they couldn't solve on their own. And so what does the psalmist do? He says this, but then I recall, notice that's intentional, he does it. I recall all you have done, O Lord. I remember your wonderful deeds of long ago. They are constantly in my thoughts. I can't stop thinking about your mighty works. So he's very intentional. I'm in this time of waiting, and it doesn't seem like you're doing anything, God. Okay, nothing's happening. And so what do I do with my mind? The first thing I do with my mind is I remember all the times you were there and helped me, and he starts listing them in the psalm. You can read it on your own. He starts thinking about direct ways in which God helped in the past, and all of that is a message to us today. If you do this, and if you've never done this, as part of this preparation, I sat down and made a list of all the times in my life where I have distinctly watched God do something in my life. And all of it is a reminder to us in those waiting times. It's like if God did this and this and this and this in your life, does it make any sense that now you're in this problem, this need, and he's just done with you? He did all of this, but now he's done with you? Does that make any sense to anybody? Like now you don't matter. Now he washes his hands of you. Now he's no longer going to keep his promises to you. Does that make any sense that he would do that? He loves you more than you have ever been loved. More than I love my children, his love is infinitely greater than that. Would I ever just walk away from my kids when they were in need? Ever? No lifetime. And he is a greater father and loves us. And he's done this and this and this and this in our lives. He will not stop now. So one of the best things I can encourage you to do is sit down and make a list of times in your life where God has helped. And think about how, we use that phrase, borrowed love, where when God wants to love on you, he sends a person into your life. So think about times in your life where people have shown you love and realize that it was God loving you through them. Make your list. Times where God provided for you through somebody else, or he guided you, or he helped you, or he healed you, or he restored you. Because if he's done all that, does it make any sense that now that you're waiting that he's done with you? Nope. Build your faithfulness list. I'm going to jump past this next one. I think it's really important. Well, I'll give it to you so you can write it down. Worship while you wait. I think it is essential. I just don't have time to teach on this one. There's a verse, you can go read that story. You can see how she worshiped even while she was waiting. I think it is essential. It gets our perspective on something bigger than just us. But I really want to jump to this one. Letter C, express your gratitude. Make gratitude your focus when you're waiting. So you've done the first thing. You've made a list. Here's how God has helped. And now I'm going to focus on gratitude while I'm waiting. And the reason this is so essential is you've got to win the battle of your mind. In those times of waiting, the spiritual enemy of your soul is going to whisper things into your ear like, you think God cares about someone like you? You think he's got a plan for you? You think he's going to help you with this? And you're going to be tempted to let go of your faith. Gratitude is how we keep our focus on God and all that he is doing for us. So flip your notes over in the back. I gave you a list of some things that you could thank God for if you're in a waiting period right now. But the third one is the one I want you to put a big star by or circle or mark it out in some way that's distinct from the others. And here's why. I was in a waiting time once, and my faith was really struggling. Matter of fact, my times in the morning with God were more like anger sessions where I'd be like, I don't get this. You made all these promises to me. You're doing nothing. You are doing nothing. I can see nothing happening. And I was getting angrier the longer the waiting time went on. But I was still praying and I was still reading my Bible. And I got up one morning to do the same thing. And in my prayer journal, I have, a section where I try and thank God. Not try and thank God. It's my gratitude section, and I just try and think through the last 24 hours and think about anything that I want to thank God for. I got to that section, and I started thinking about what I'm grateful for, and all of a sudden a thought popped in my mind, and the thought was this: why don't you thank God for this waiting period that you're in? So that's the third one. Why don't you thank God for this waiting period that you're in the middle of right now? And I thought immediately, well, that's the voice of the devil. That's clearly not God telling me to thank God for this waiting period. There was zero part of me that wanted to thank God for all the time of waiting that I was in the middle of. Zero. I did not want to do it. But I bowed my head and I made my mouth say it. God, thank you for this time of waiting that you've put me in the middle of. And it was interesting what started to happen inside of my heart. Because the first time I said it to God, I didn't really mean a lot of it. But as the days went on and I got to that, I wouldn't let that one go away. I'm like, thank you, God. You know what happens to your attitude when you begin to thank God for those times of waiting, when you can't even see any positive coming? All of a sudden, he begins to build your faith again. He'll use that gratitude as a way to build your faith and trust in the middle of the waiting time. Give it a try. See what happens for you. But the fourth thing I'd say is then you want to look for God's kindness, because He's going to show kindness. And there's a yes or no question I want you to answer on your notes, and it comes right after this verse. Numbers 23. So look at this on your notes. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Does God speak and then not act? Does God make promises and then not fulfill them? And next to that word, fulfill, I want you to write yes or no. You answer that question. Does God promise things and not fulfill them? Yes or no? What do you believe? What do you believe? Because I'd say no. Because the moment he tells one lie, he's no longer God. The moment he makes one promise that he doesn't intend to fulfill, he's no longer God. So it is against his character. He cannot do it. He cannot lie to us. So the answer is absolutely, emphatically, does he promise and not fulfill? No. He never promises something and doesn't fulfill it. He always fulfills his promise when we wait. So I was reading as I was prepping, and I read about this story, this young couple that got married in college. And she worked and put him through his final year of college. They graduated from college. He graduated from college, and they had a mountain of debt. Didn't say in the story what the degree was that he had earned. So they started doing what young college graduates do, right? Find a job. So they searched all over, and they were strong Christians, and so they prayed and prayed and prayed and said, God, where do you want us to go? Where should we go? What would be the right job for us? And they found this great job down in just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And so went through the interview process, got the job, They packed up their little, when you're young, car basically, drove to Charlotte. They found an apartment. The first 3 months were only half rent. It's like, God is in this. Everything's working out, because all they had the day they moved in was, their vehicle and a mountain of debt from his college degree. So as they're unpacking the apartment, he decides to just stop in with his boss and meet in the office and just touch base before he gets started working there. So he goes to the office, and he walks in, and the guy says, "Oh, Steve, I'm glad you're here." He said, "I've been thinking about it, and I don't think that hiring you was such a good idea after all. I've changed my mind." And he held out his hand and said, "Good luck to you, son." He went home and told his wife, and she said, "We were shell-shocked." She said, "What do you mean he changed his mind? We just moved here. We made a commitment." She said, "I was full of a whole lot of emotions and questions for God. Like, we prayed, we fasted, we wanted nothing more than to do what you wanted us to do. And now here we are in a new city with all this debt and no job." She said, "I felt like God had left us high and dry." Have you ever been in a spot where you felt like God left you high and dry? She said, "I had no idea what to do. We had no idea what to do." 3 months after that job fell through, they were just barely scraping by, and all of a sudden, a position opened up that had not been available when they started looking. She said, "If you would have sat us down in college and said, 'What's your dream role? What's your dream role, Steve? If you could write your dream job description, write it out." She said, "If we had written out Steve's dream job description, it still would not have been as great as the job that came available 3 months later." He applied and got the dream job. And she said, sometimes God doesn't meet our expectations because he wants to exceed them. What if God has you in a waiting pattern right now, not meeting your expectations because your expectations are too low? And he wants to exceed, which is a verse, right? In Ephesians 3, God is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. And then she said something I thought was amazing. She said, "Our limited vision doesn't allow us to see how God is working behind the questionable scenes in our lives, but we can trust he is. In fact, it may be precisely in those moments we understand him the least that he is working the most." What if that's true right now in your life? In the moments where you're waiting, where you understand him the least, that he is actually working the most. So let me give you some things to think about. Where in your life are you waiting today? It's unlikely that I'm talking to people who are waiting for nothing. Like I said, there could be a relationship that you're waiting to change. There could be some financial situation, a career situation. There's so many things. I want you to think about this. Do you believe that God has a purpose in making you wait? Do you believe that? Do you believe that he's got you on pause in that waiting room as an act of preparation, or is it punishment? And what step could you take today to start to build your faith? I'm telling you, the hardest one that I've taken on that list is to thank God in the waiting period. That's hard. Now, maybe that'll be your easiest. Maybe some of you are like, "I already did that, Brian. I do it all the time." Okay, then which of those other steps is going to be the one that's harder for you? Take a step of faith. Watch for his kindness, worship while you wait, or to make that list of how he's been faithful in the past and think about that. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish. If you're watching online today or here and you hear us talk about God, and again, we talk about him so personally. He made a promise that he is personal and knowable and wants to be your guide through this world. What he did for Joseph in the right time, he has promised that he will do for all of us. And he loves you so much that he proved it by sending his son Jesus into this world to die on a cross for all of us. Every unloving act we have ever done in this world has damaged our relationship with God. And so God sent his son to pay the price in full. And any human being, anywhere, anytime, who turns to Jesus and asks for this gift can be completely forgiven and can have a brand new relationship with God where he becomes your personal father and where he becomes your guide in this world. And if you want more than just religion, if you want Jesus, with your head bowed, you can say something like this. You can say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I'm putting my trust in you today. I don't have all the answers yet, but with the faith I have, I'm coming to you. Please, forgive me. I want to be a part of your family today. In Jesus' name, amen. As we finish up again, I ask you every week, would you grab the little card out of your program? Just, even if you're a regular tender, just put your name down. But if you ask Jesus to forgive you or renewed your commitment, let us know about that. Some of you are waiting on something really important. If you want the team, the prayer people in our church to pray for you, just put it down. You're welcome to just put anonymous or just say, pray for something I'm waiting for. You can put down anything you want to. We have a team of people that will pray for you today. Then just drop this card in one of the back offering boxes on the wall where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. We hope to see you again next Sunday.